Okay, so on a more serious note, that's me on the big screen. So I work as a developer evangelist for a company called Cloudinary, and I also run a training company called Full Stack Training. I've been doing presentations about various pieces of technology for meetups, at conferences, and I do workshops as well on what I like to call the latest and greatest of today's web technologies. And today we're going to talk about this thing called the JAMstack. So quick show of hands, who heard about the JAMstack, first of all? Few of you. Who knows what it is? Okay, like about 5 people. Okay, so what is the JAMstack? So the JAMstack is really just an abbreviation. It stands for JavaScript, APIs, and Markup. Okay, so this is a concept that has been around for quite a while, but the term, the JAMstack has been coined about 2 or 3 years ago. So you may have heard about things like web serverless applications, or static applications, or pre-rendered applications. So they all refer to the JAMstack as well. So essentially what the JAMstack is that you pick your favorite JavaScript framework, or just you write some vanilla JavaScript, so you work with JavaScript. You then have a bunch of APIs. It can be an API that you develop in-house, or it can be an API that you consume, like a third-party API. And then you pick a markup language as well, which then you use to render your entire application. Okay, so this is the core concept of it. Now, there's a lot more to it, and then we're going to get to that towards the end. So you're probably thinking, okay, this is all great and nice, but why would you want to use this stack at the first place? So there's a bunch of reasons, right? The first one is SEO. Now, if you think about Angular applications or other applications that work as a single page application, the search crawlers or the web crawlers have trouble parsing those pages, right? So you need to do a lot of work, or you need to even move away from the idea of single page apps if you want your site properly indexed by these crawlers. Now, if you have the JAMstack, and I'm going to show you why that is, SEO becomes very easy. So you basically, at the end of your project, you will end up having HTML files that have all the content in them. Therefore, there's no extra work that you need to do. Performance. If you think about all these wonderful frameworks that are out there, the result of you guys using them is that you rely on a lot of JavaScript. And of course, what is the heaviest processing in the browser that can happen is the processing of JavaScript, right? So that, sometimes doesn't work very well. Now, if you think about just static HTML pages, the browser is, we're made to parse those pages, so it's going to be very, very fast. So with the JAMstack, you can unlock some performance as well. Deployment, we're going to see this in a live demo. That's my fingers crossed, because I don't know how that well is going to go. But essentially, with the JAMstack, you can very easily deploy your application. Okay, so you can have very atomic deploy. So you make a small change in your application, and that's what I'm going to do as well. You run a few commands, and then the application should be updated wherever you host it. And then there's also a great number of services that you can use with the JAMstack, and I'm going to show you quite a few of those as well. So when I first even heard about the JAMstack, I got really, really confused with all the terminologies and all the language that these websites and blogs and tutorials were using. So I thought I would sum these up for you guys. So single page apps, right? Probably everyone has heard about that. The basic premise of the single page app is that it loads an application shell, and then on a root change in your application, you just re-render or load another component. But the application shell itself is never going to change, right? So that's how a single page application works. Now, with these application types, the main execution of your application happens inside the browser, right? So that's the key thing that I want you to remember, that for single page apps, the rendering and everything else, the execution is done in the browser, okay? Then another term, server-side rendering, sometimes abbreviated to SSR. Anyone? Few of you. Okay, so sometimes when you read about server-side rendering, you come across these terms universal or isomorphic applications. They refer to the server-side rendering bit as well. And the main difference between single-page apps and applications that utilize server-side rendering is that the main processing of your application happens in the server side. So what happens is that you have some sort of a server and an application. You click on a link, and then the server is going to generate that HTML, and it's going to serve that HTML to the browser in a generated format. Whereas with the single page application model, you click on a link, and then the parsing and the execution of JavaScript happens there, right? So there's no sort of pre-rendered HTML sent to the browser, right? So that's the main difference between server-side rendering and single page applications. And because you know, the browser now has a complete HTML file to process, things like the first paint, the first contentful paint, and the time to interact, which are all measurements that Google does in their Lighthouse auditing tools, these are going to be a lot faster. So far, so good? Okay. Then enter static site generators. So static site generators basically pre-generate HTML files for you, and theoretically these HTML files could be run without any JavaScript. And there's a key difference between a static site generator and the site that is pre-rendered. Okay? The way you can determine what is, you know, what is pre-rendered and what is SSG is that you open up the application, you disable JavaScript, one will work, the other one will not work. Okay? So a static site should work without JavaScript, whereas if you have a pre-rendered site that still heavily relies on JavaScript, should fail, or at least have a very limited functionality. Now, there are multiple static site generators out there. I have a link towards the end of the slide where you can take a look at those, or we can talk about them as well. So, we have this out of the way, right? So, the other thing is, how do you manage your content in the JAMstack? And there's another term for that, which is Headless CMS. Who has heard about Headless CMS before? Okay, a few of you. Who heard about CMS? Good, okay. So a Headless CMS is really just a CMS without its front end. Okay, so if you think about classic example, WordPress. Everyone knows WordPress, right? So you have a WordPress site up and running, you have a /admin area where there's an entire front end where you can manage your content, and without that you can't use WordPress, which is not true because now you can, but 5 years ago you couldn't, right? So you had a front end for it. Now Headless CMS means that you don't have a front end for your CMS, and you can just use and manage some sort of content. Now there are two types of Headless CMSs out there. There's one that is based on APIs or REST APIs, and I'm going to show you one, and there's others that are Git based. Now the Git based pretty much mean that you have a bunch of markdown files somewhere in Git, and then they can take that content and, you know, provide it to your application. Whereas the API based ones usually work with some sort of databases. Okay? Now the Headless CMSs, especially the ones that are really good, and I'm going to introduce you to one, can give you the full CMS functionality. So it can, you know, allow you to manage your users, manage your content, and then serve that content somehow. And then another interesting premise of the JAMstack is continuous delivery. So we're going to see this as well. Essentially what you have is you have a Git repository where you have your application, and then you make some changes to that application. You then do a Git commit and a Git push, and then that code is going to be automatically deployed and available to your end users. Okay, so that's the whole premise of this continuous delivery model. And there's quite a lot of providers out there as well that you can leverage in the JAMstack, right? So most of these are API providers, so things like Typeform. So if you want to have a form without having a backend for that form, you can just use their service and just, you know, place a few lines of code into your application, and you have a form in there. For payments, there's Stripe. For authentication, there's Auth0. There's Twilio, there's Firebase, Netlify, and all these various providers. And we're going to talk about, I think, about 3 or 4 of these out from this wonderfully generated cloud. Okay, so how does this all look like? So here's your, you know, white slide, because I had to have one. So you are the developer, right? So you're sitting there at your desk and then you develop an application. And the technologies that you decided to use are Strapi, Vue, and Nuxt.js. Okay, so what are those? So Vue.js, probably you guys are familiar with that. Okay, so it's a front-end framework. The other symbol next to it, so that other green, black symbol that you see there, which is the Vue symbol upside down, that's the Nuxt.js symbol. Nuxt.js is a static side generator and a server-side renderer for Vue applications. Okay, so we're going to be using that as well. And then you use Strapi. Anyone heard about Strapi before? Okay, a few of you. So Strapi is an example of a headless CMS. Okay, so what you do on your machine is that you develop an application that uses Vue.js and it consumes some data from this headless CMS. Okay. Then you decide, okay, I'm ready to go. Then you do a git commit and then you commit your changes or your entire application to GitHub. Okay. Now we have another service here. These are the two greenish, bluish icons that you see in the middle. That's Netlify. Okay. So Netlify basically allows you to listen to changes under your Git profile, and then it will do some magical work, which we will take a look at in a second, and then it pushes your updated application to their CDN, to the various edges, and that means that your application is now available immediately to everyone, okay? And on top of that, Netlify uses, the best technologies out there, so they serve everything over HTTP2, so everything is going to perform well, but we're going to talk about that as well. Now, at the same time, you have your headless CMS, right? So you created a headless CMS, you created an API that you consume from your Vue application that needs to run somewhere as well, okay? So I don't know how many of you have used Heroku, but if you do a git push Heroku master, then you can push those changes to a cloud provider like Heroku, and then you now have your API available wherever your application is going to run, not just locally, okay? And in fact, this is the structure of the sample application that we're going to take a look at. So I have a Strapi headless CMS running on Heroku that actually goes out to Mongo Lab to get some data, and then I created this Vue Nuxt application to consume that data. And then furthermore, remember that slide where we had all those providers? I also added Cloudinary, not just because I work for them, but also, just to manage the images that I have in the application. And that again means that I don't need to worry about my application or my CMS, those live in the cloud, but my application can leverage that. Does this make sense, roughly? I'm going to show this application to you now, but hopefully this all makes sense. Right. Now comes the interesting bit. So I'll try to do this one-handed. Right. No, wrong one, sorry. That's the right screen. So, Star Wars fans. Like 3, come on. Okay, so Star Wars application, right? So what you have here is the final application, very, very simple one. It uses the Strapi headless CMS to go out to the Mongo database, and then it presents you the list of characters, okay? How do I, there's my mouse. Okay, so I can scroll through this and I can go and click on one character and then find more information about them. Cool, that's pretty much it, okay? So this is the application that I developed, and now let me show you how the backend works for this first before we make any changes to the application. Okay, so this is the Heroku instance. This Heroku instance runs Strapi, so it has a headless CMS, and it also has a connection to Mongo Lab. So it has a connection to a Mongo database where essentially the data is coming from. Now, if you're new to Strapi, this is how the Strapi UI looks like. It's very, very easy to set up. It's literally, it's based on Node. All you need to do is npm install globally Strapi, and then you do Strapi new, and then the name of the project. And then they set everything up for you. And then while you set up this Strapi headless CMS, they ask you, do you want to connect to Mongo, to MySQL, or to any other database to get the data from? Once you set it up, they give you this admin interface where you can then create content. So you can have various content types. Character is one content type that I use. And then you can populate that right here, right? So I could add a new character. You can specify all these fields and they allow you to manage pretty much everything, right? So you type this in, you hit save, and then a new piece of information is then saved in the database of your choice. In this case, that's, as I said, Mongo. Then you go to roles and permissions, and then public. So I'm not doing a strappy demo for you, but essentially what I want to show you here is that you go and say, for the characters, I want to allow the find one, and update methods. Okay, so there's basically an HTTP get and an HTTP, I think that's a post. No, put. I don't know, an update. Okay, so basically you now have an endpoint exposed. So what I can do is I can take this, go to this URL, and then type in characters. I can't see anything. Am I at the A? Yeah. That works? Okay. So what you get is basically an endpoint that returns you this data from the database. Okay, so this is the endpoint that my application is consuming. Now, where is that application running? So that application is running on Netlify. Okay, so I registered for Netlify, it's free. And then I basically connected my GitHub account and a single GitHub repository, which is the repository of this application, with Netlify. So what that means is that every time when I do a change, they do a deploy. Okay, so here you can see some of my failed attempts as well. And this is what I'm going to demo to you in just a second. So we'll make a change to the application, do a git push, git commit, and then theoretically, this production deploy should start to do something. You get to pick what commands they should run when you make a push. And in this case, the command that I'm running is related to Nuxt. So as I said, Nuxt is a static site generator, okay? Oh, you don't see this. There. They basically allow you to either create a universal app, a single page app, and they also have a command which is called generate, and it's literally just npm run generate. That command is going to generate a static site for you. So it's going to generate an HTML, a bunch of HTML pages, which then you can deploy to wherever you want. It doesn't have to be Netlify, but then because of this continuous integration thing that I mentioned, I thought, to showcase Netlify as well. But you could take the generated HTML and put it on Amazon S3 or wherever you want to host them, because theoretically they should work. So let's make the change, and I'm going to put the microphone down because I need 2 hands to do this. But what we're going to do is we're going to essentially add another menu item on the bottom and add some functionality to it, git commit push, and then see what happens. I'll do the change here and then I'll put it back, okay? Sorry. I could mirror that, that's a good one. This place. Ooh, stop the recording. It's fine, don't worry. Okay, I'll restart the recording. New screen recording. Sorry guys, 1 second. Okay. So, as I said, what we're going to do is take this bit. So that's the new navigation item that we're going to put there. And we're going to put it right here. I'm not going to worry about formatting this. And then I'm going to create an entire new page as well. This is the code. By the way, this is standard Vue.js code that you see here. That's all what I'm doing. Now, the way you create a new page in Nuxt is, I'll try to do it this way. You see these pages? That's where you have all the pages that make up the application. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a new one here. New file, alliance.vue. And I'm just going to put all of this here. Okay, so if we want, we can actually test this locally, of course. So let's do that. And the command that I'm going to do is npm run dev. Okay, so this is now going to build an application for me. And then we can go to the browser, localhost port 3000, and then see our changes hopefully soon. Now, while that's happening, I want to talk about another thing. I don't know if you noticed something, but we have this list of characters here, and then notice that we see their faces, right? But when I click on it, I see the entire image. Now, believe it or not, that's exactly the same image. I'm not using two separate images. So how do you think that's done? Yes, sir. Background? Not CSS property. Of course, Cloudinary. I told you I work for Cloudinary. Come on. Okay, so how is it done? Let me show you real quick here what's happening. So here we have a demo image, right? So network. Let's do this again. Okay, so this is an image 570 kilobytes in size. Okay, so this is what we will call the raw untouched image, right? It has an access URL, so it's been uploaded to Cloudinary, and that's it, right? Now, what we're going to do is modify this URL, and I'm going to add this QAuto. So that's one property that we can add in Cloudinary. What I want you to do is try to see if you notice a visual quality reduction in the image itself. You did? You shouldn't, but very small. Okay, but it's negligible. Yet the size is now 45 kilobytes. Okay, so Cloudinary has processed this image, and this QAuto flag pretty much reduces the quality of the image in a minimal way so that it's not visible to the human eye. Okay, so that's one thing. We're going to get to that face thing in just a second. What I'm going to do is add f_auto. Okay, so that is going to take a look at the browser that we use, and it's going to serve the most appropriate image format for the browser, which in the case of Chrome is WebP, which then means we again halve the size of the image. Okay, and if I take a look at the headers here, hopefully you guys can see that. Even though this is a JPEG image, what I get back is image WebP. Okay? Right, so let's stop here. Let's see how our thing is going. Okay, the application warning, that's fine. Let's load this. Localhost 3000. Ooh. What did I do? Ah, come on. You love live demos, don't you? No idea. Anyway, let's continue with the Cloudinary bit. That was more exciting. I'll try to fix that in a second. Okay, so what else we can do? We can say this image should be width 400. So now the Cloudinary servers return us an image that has this width, and then basically we can do a crop thumbnail. Let's actually do something like 40. Oh, sorry. 200. And I'm going to do a gravity_face, which is going to automatically find the face and then put that into the center. Okay, so what's happening is that I stored those images and I just applied these transformations within the application, but essentially it's the same image all the time. Okay, once I find a face and I put it into the list, The other time I just retrieve the entire image itself. Okay, let's try to still do a git. I need 2 hands. Okay, so we did a change, and then at least I want to show you what happens with Netlify, which is, where did I put it? Right here. Okay, so this is the Netlify interface, and theoretically what we get is this building bit. Okay, so I did some changes in my application, I committed those changes, and now Netlify has seen that via the GitHub webhooks, and I told, and this is the command that we're after, so I told Netlify that whenever there's a change, please run the Nuxt generate command. And the Nuxt generate command is going to generate that static site. Okay, so eventually, that error, you don't need to worry about that error, by the way, that comes from the Nuxt package. So eventually what's going to happen is that it's going to generate the static file, and then we'll see if the changes that I did are visible on Netlify or not, or we get the same error. I don't know, but at least you see the, if there's an error, you see that I did push something and it does kind of work, even though the application itself doesn't work. Right, so everything's green, site is live. Well, we'll see how live that is. Let's go back here. Okay, but that worked, right? So what we added, alliances menu item, click. Oh, alliance, did I not? You know what? Oh. You get it, right? Yeah. 1 sec. Anyway, continuous integration and delivery, right? So this is now going to restart the whole process. While that's happening, let me finish up my slides. So hopefully I don't want to take too much time. So some resources, I'm going to share these slides with you. Collection of headless CMSs, collection of static site generators. So I use Vue and Nuxt. There are some other static site generators for other technologies. So there's Next.js, which is a static site generator for React. There's Gatsby. There's, that site contains all of them. If you're interested in Strapi, I link to the Strapi docs. If you're interested at Cloudinary, there's the Cloudinary docs. And I just made that repo public. So the Star Wars app is a link to the application that you kind of see. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. Let me quickly check how the thing is doing. I really want to show you the filtering as well. So let's go back to here. Okay. Site is live. Site is live. So let's do this. Please work. Yay! Okay, so what you can do, you can filter, right? So the first order, and then you get these characters. Okay, that's all the demo. Last thing, and then I'm off from the stage. Because I really want to show you why, the JAMstack is important. So we do a quick audit on this site. So run the audit. And I've not only made this a static site, but I also made it a progressive web app. Boom. So, so what that means is that this site is also going to work offline. And what we should get back, at least, is a score of hundreds everywhere in best practice, progressive web app performance, what kind of, okay? So static sites are cool. JAMstack is cool. I should be going, because he looks at me like, you should get off. Thank you very much again. I think we have a break now. I'll be here for another, whatever the break is, and then unfortunately I have to leave. So if you have any questions, come and find me. Thank you very much.